We continue with our alumni speaker series. Today's speaker is a member of the class of 1953. At Jesuit, he lettered in wrestling and was a member of the 1951 state championship team. Following Jesuit High School, he went to work as a cameraman and photographer for WWL TV. CBS came calling, where he quickly became the national network's go-to cameraman, shooting for 60 minutes the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather, and On the Road with Charles Kuralt. During his long career, he witnessed and documented the milestones and icons of the late 20th century: the Civil Rights Movement, Vatican II, the Beatles' arrival in the United States, Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy, the 1968 Chicago riots, the Vietnam War, and the rise and fall of the Berlin Wall. At least twice in his life, he has escaped tragedy. Once when he was chased by the Ku Klux Klan when his helicopter crashed while he was covering the America's Cup race. This award-winning journalist from humble beginnings in downtown New Orleans has shaken hands with John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Pope John XXIII, and John, Paul, George, and Ringo. He is the subject of a new book by New Orleans historical geographer Richard Campanella, The Photojournalism of Del Hall, New Orleans and Beyond, 1950s and 2000s. Please welcome home from the class of 1953, Del Hall.
Well, let's see. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Blue Jays. Thank you for the introduction. But that's most of my speech. I think he pretty well gave it away. Anyway, I thank you all for being here, and not that you had a choice, but it's nice to see all of you Blue Jays. So it's been 60 years since I graduated, and a lot has happened to me, as you've heard, and to the world since then. The years have flown by, and before you know it, you too will be attending your 60th reunion. I didn't plan to come to Jesuit. I didn't know anything about it, and I always expected to go to Warren Easton, my neighborhood high school. One day, Father Stallworth, the principal of Jesuit at the time, dropped by my 8th grade class at St. Joseph Grammar School to talk to us about Jesuit and do a little recruiting. He had a booklet describing the classes to us, a little syllabus, I guess, but it also had a picture of a film enlarger in a darkroom at the school, and that was it. I was hooked. I had to go to Jesuit, and I did. But in 4 years, for some reason, I never got to see that darkroom. But I was still taking pictures every day and collecting valuable negatives. I even made a shot of the highest paid athlete at his time, the highest paid athlete in the world at his time, Gorgeous George, the wrestler, at the Coliseum Arena. Now here's the hard part. A classmate of mine, Arthur Kingsmill was his name, he had a darkroom at home and offered to print some of my negatives for me, but it was not to be. The next day he gave me the bad news. He put the negatives in his uniform shirt pocket, and his mother washed the shirt with my negatives in it before it was still in there. I thought my career as a photographer was over, but I was wrong. So instead of becoming a still photographer for Life magazine, I became one of the first generation of news cameramen at WWL. I learned the most interesting lesson I learned was that a cameraman at that time would always be given the best seat in the house, and that was around the world. There were only 3 TV stations in town at the time, and each cameraman worked alone, usually carrying his tripod, camera, sound equipment, extra film, and lighting. The term was a one-man band. It sounds complicated, but the cameraman was in charge. In fact, one day, I was filming Dan Rather, and you go a little this way, a little bit that way, and a little bit. And he turned to the crowd and he said, the last of the dictators. The 60s began with school integration in the South, a small war in Vietnam. I was arrested for filming a sit-in Woolworth at the lunch counter. I was chased by the Klan in Mississippi, shot at in Vietnam, filmed the New Berlin Wall, met the President LBJ, JFK, and Pope John the 23rd. I kissed his ring, and even filmed the Beatles, all while at WWL. But in the late 60s, CBS brought me to Chicago to work as a cameraman for the Midwest Bureau, and a chance to cover national and international stories for the evening news and for 60 Minutes. But it was a little different then. Because of being a one-man band, the network had a three-man crew: the cameraman, sound man, and lighting. And we flew everywhere first class. We had to have a packed bag at the office all the time. And before getting on a plane, we had to call the office, or as soon as we landed, we had to call. So I traveled the world, you know, you've heard that: Moscow, China, Argentina, Grenada, Laos, London, Paris, Berlin, Rome, and a few other places that I couldn't remember. So, and I was nominated for a National Emmy 3 times before winning one for my work with Charles Kuralt. And earlier that same year, while covering the America's Cup races off of Newport, Rhode Island, our helicopter plunged into the Atlantic Ocean, and I spent almost 2 years recovering before going back to work. That same year, CBS was the first year to switch from film to tape, and cameramen eventually returned to the one-man band again, so I think that's what you see. So now there is no film or tape left. Everything is shot on a memory disk, like we're doing right now. So I'm back at New Orleans this week to attend a book launch of this book, written by a Tulane professor, Richard Campanella. It's going to take place at the Octavia Bookstore Wednesday evening. It's entitled The Photojournalism of Del Hall, that's me, and it's the story of my career as a cameraman, documenting world affairs. So in summary, I had a wonderful life in an unconventional job that did not exist when I started Jesuit. In fact, my parents did not even own a television set. So you may spend another 40 or 50 years working in a traditional job like education, medicine, law, or finance, or even the priesthood. But there's also a good chance there's something new on the horizon for you. You even may invent it yourself. But the future will be what you make it, with a lot of hard work. So go to class and start planning for your future, whatever it is. Thanks.